Okay. So thank you all for being here again. By all of us coming together twice a month like we've been doing, it's helping to build a stronger Vaishnavi community within our society. And so it's so beautiful that we're all able to come together like this. And so for this very auspicious Sangha, we have the honor of having with us Her Grace, Rambaru Prabhu, Rambaru Devi Dasi. And we also have Ananda Vrindavan here to introduce Rambaru for us all. So thank you very much. And let me make sure that, there we go.
Okay, Hare Krishna everybody. So it is my great honor to introduce the wonderful Rambaru. So she joined ISKCON in 1974, way back then, and with her husband, Prithu Das, established and managed ISKCON ashrams in Europe, in Ireland, and in Switzerland. And then she wrote a book in 1990, Food for Peace, a vegetarian cookbook for beginners, which is really popular, and it also became a way that those of us from the West could learn how to cook Indian-themed vegetarian food. And then she lived in Vrindavan for 8 years. I knew her a little bit in Vrindavan. She lived up the road from me in a beautiful ashram there, and in Mayapur. And then she returned to the States and took the path that we are so grateful that she took, because I personally feel right now the work that Rambaru is doing in ISKCON today is just at the right place at the right time, even without COVID, which makes it even more just like more essential, and what a great service. Anyway, so she did her Master's of Divinity and a master's degree in patient counseling. And she was board certified as a professional chaplain in 2008 and as a grief support specialist and facilitator. And that was in 2014, and a clinical pastoral educator. That's a PhD level of practical theology and chaplain training in 2015. So you can see she's just been going deeper and deeper and deeper, constantly in the mood of learning, now in the mood of teaching and learning these, the skills to create spaces and create conversations and create areas where we can, really face some of the parts of ourselves that need healing, that need grieving, that need weeping, that need to get attention. I've always felt that Krishna consciousness is just such an authentic practice, because it actually helps us face some of the things in our journey to finding ourselves, some of the issues we may have to, welcome, and although sometimes painful, but Krishna consciousness helps us walk through them. Before, I used to think Krishna consciousness would make them disappear. And yes, to a certain extent that can happen, but I've also realized that the process of Krishna consciousness is such an emotional process, and the end result is it's all about relationship, that it actually also draws all kinds of emotions out of us. And Rambaru's work, I think, really helps us face into that in new and powerful, and as I mentioned earlier, really needed ways. Currently, she is the director of the St. Camillus Center for Spiritual Care and the Urban Interfaith Chaplaincy Clinical Pastoral Education Program. That's since 2010. And the really exciting thing is she's the founder director of ISKCON Karuna Care Education. This started in 2019, an educational program, a new educational program for ISKCON compassionate care counselors. And she does herself, as well as training others, she provides compassionate care and counseling. It says here on her bio that she has an office at our temple, ISKCON of DC at Potomac. And sadly, since COVID-19, we have not had her sit in that office, and we are missing her in person, but she's still available online via Zoom, Skype, and FaceTime, and can be contacted there. So not only does she does great work, but she's actually starting to train devotees in this really, really important aspect of our movement, Karuna Care. And I'm so personally grateful to you, Ramburu, but when, just on a personal level, when she would come to the temple on the weekends and she'd bring her harp, and she'd just, by her personhood, be so soothing and encouraging to all of us at the temple, asking for very little, but just being present in so many ways for all the devotees. So thank you for being you, and thank you for all the wonderful things that you do and are inspiring others to do. So please give Ramburu Prabhu a warm and loving welcome to this Zoom conference. Hare Krishna.
Ananda, I want to be sure that you can hear me because it's seriously breaking up from my side.
You are also breaking up for us.
Yeah.
What is?
And I don't know.
This is usually your spot, right? This is where you do.
It is, and I have all green lights. I have all green, and I don't know whether I should log out and come back in.
Why don't you try that?
Usually I'm the host.
Why don't you try that first, and then the experts on this team.
I will leave and come back and see if I correct it.
Yeah.
Okay. Sorry.
Problem. Thank you.
That's about as much tech that I know, like turn off and turn on. So somebody else may be better able to advise.
No, I think that is a good solution. I think that may help. I've had this happen before in other forums, so.
Okay, let's pray.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, thank you. We should have done that. So the name of this little talk, I have called it Time, Change, Loss, and Grief. And in the ancient wisdom text of India, Bhagavad Gita, it says, time I am, the destroyer of the world, and I have come to engage all people. In another text, it says, the time factor who causes the transformation of the various material manifestations is another feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Anyone who does not know that time is the same Supreme Personality is afraid of this time factor. So these texts offer some insights as we begin our discussion around time, change, loss, and grief. So everything in this material world happens in the context of a particular time. We are conceived in our mother's womb at a particular time as a tiny speck of energy potential. And from that moment, due to the time factor, our bodies start changing. First, it becomes a blob of blood and tissue, and then it continues growing and changing into something that starts to look like a human being. Effortlessly, an embryo evolves and it has absolutely no control over what he or she is becoming. The mother also has absolutely no control over the evolution of this embryo except the part she plays in nourishing and protecting it by taking care of herself. And from that very moment of conception, the time factor propels us like we are on a conveyor belt. We take birth, we grow, we reach our peak as human beings, perhaps we reproduce ourselves or something, and then immediately we begin to dwindle, and then we die. And there's nothing any of us can do about that, even if we could pay millions of dollars in exchange for one lost moment of time. It is absolutely impossible for any of us to stop this process. So we're all swimming in this reality of uncontrollable time. And along with this uncontrollable time factor also comes this inevitability of change. Like time, there's no way of stopping this process of changing. It is what brings about the seasons. Like right now, we're moving from summer to winter, and in between there's this autumn. And fall, the leaves are changing, and it's preparing us for a kind of natural dying process in nature that brings us to the winter season. And all of this happens. It's completely predictable, and it's due to the regulated rotations of the Earth and orbits around the sun, and due to how close or distant the Earth and the sun are from each other. And in this way, the time factor brings about change in the Earth planet. And like the natural seasons, we also have these effects of the uncontrollable time. The changing is happening in our bodies and our minds due to this time factor that brings about the change. So from the moment of conception to birth, to growth, to living for a while, to reproducing ourselves, to dwindling, and then finally to death, we are all the time being controlled by this moving pusher, controller called time. It is so subtle, and perhaps not so subtle, how our bodies are changing at every moment, and how every cell in our bodies are changing all the time, even we're not noticing it. For example, our red blood cells, they live for about 4 months, while white blood cells live on an average of more than a year. Skin cells live about 2 to 3 weeks, and our colon cells only live for about 4 days. The cells in each body part have different lifespans, and there are just a few things we have, that's just a couple of things that we don't have any control of inside our bodies that are changing all the time. And there's a whole lot of other things that we cannot change in our lives that are happening all around us all the time. It's funny that we think of ourselves as being in control when we think about how much we are controlled by the time and the change factor. Vedic wisdom points to at least 4 things that we cannot control: birth, old age, disease, and death. And these are basic experiences that all of us have. And one of my favorite psychologists, David Rico, he points to some other things we cannot control, which he calls the 5 true things. Number 1, everything changes and ends. Number 2, things do not always go according to plan. Number 3, life is not always fair. 4, pain is part of life. Number 5, people are not loving all the time. So we could go on and on listing so many other givens in life that we have no control over, that we never even think about. And a large part of our navigating life in this material world has to do with coming to terms with all these constant changes happening all of the time that are completely beyond our control. Some changes are predictable, like the changing of the seasons and the changing of our bodies, which happens slowly, but we might not notice that it's happening right before our eyes. And although these changes are happening all the time, we are not aware of how change is affecting us all of the time. Change is a kind of open secret that is hidden in plain sight. We see ourselves as children. Then suddenly we are teenagers. Oh, then suddenly we're married with children. Oh, then suddenly we're all old people. And suddenly death is at our door, and it's time for us to leave our bodies, something most of us spend a good bit of time not thinking about. And despite our theoretically knowing about some of these life cycle changes that are destined to happen to us, we are entirely surprised when they do happen. And that is when we experience ourselves in something called crisis, which is simply a sudden, unexpected change in our life. So every change marks the ending of something. And with all changes comes the experience of loss. Loss of a relationship, loss of a body part, loss of a job, loss of a possession, maybe loss of a pet, loss of enthusiasm, loss of our identity, or loss of trust in a person or an organization. And along with every type of loss comes with it the feeling of grief, particularly if we have a strong attachment to the person, the place, or the thing that we have lost. To that degree, we feel the pain of grief. It is completely natural that we should experience this grief, and it's built into human existence. For example, imagine you are sitting on a train while it is stopped in a train station, and you are holding onto a pole outside the window of the train. And then the train starts moving and you don't let go of the pole. Well, what do you think will happen? Eventually, your arm will start to pull and hurt. And if you don't let go of that pole, it's going to be pulled out of your socket and you're going to experience a whole lot of pain. So if we can grasp these few things, that behind all creation is inevitable time, that time is the cause of constant change, that brings about losses, that naturally results in the experience of grief, then we can begin to accept reality as it is instead of fighting against it or trying to control it. Learning to accept these givens of life is what is considered to be wisdom. To not only know this truth intellectually, but to stop fighting against it. Recently, a couple of days ago, I had an experience that, although it was kind of simple, was very instructive to me. Every day, I sit outside the back door of my basement before sunrise as part of my meditation routine. And on this particular morning, when I opened the door, I have one of these glass sliding doors. There was this huge spider had woven a spider web that covered the door, blocking the doorway. So I couldn't go out. And at the moment I opened the door, the spider was still spinning their web. And I just couldn't bear to destroy all the hard work that that spider had undergone to make that beautiful symmetric technology, which was the source of their livelihood. And I stood there imagining myself as the spider who had invested so much of its energy building a home for itself, only to have a large human, unbeknownst to them, thoughtlessly walk through it, destroying it in the process. I refrained my normal morning movements and sat inside the basement door, cracking it open to get some fresh air. And I felt in my heart a kind of sadness, not so much because my morning routine had been interrupted, but due to the dilemma I was facing in terms of how to respond to this little creature who, oblivious of my presence and my potential danger, was busily working away at building a life for herself. As I was aware that it was only a matter of time, whether I ruined the web or somebody else ruined it, it was only a matter of time before someone or something would inevitably destroy their whole universe. I sat and I pondered whether it would have been less painful for me to have disturbed their home before they were finished weaving it so they could move over and build it in a more safe place, or to wait until they had finally fully installed their home, which was their big spider web. And then I reflected on how all of life was filled with such complexity and how futile it seemed for us to work so hard building a life when inevitable time would destroy it sooner or later. Like the little spider, we are busily struggling to erect permanent living situations and making so many plans in a world where change is built into its design, which means inevitable loss and consequent grief. So we may wonder why creation was made in this way, that everything is in the created world has a lifespan, that our relationships pass through phases, from romance through struggle to commitment, and then end with death or separation. that our interest in hobbies or careers pass through a bell-shaped curve of rising interest, cresting, and decline, that our bodies age, our possessions deteriorate, and our memories wane. And in nature, too, species of animals, they disappear. Earthquakes realign the continental plates, and even the rose will fade after being in full bloom. The good news is that it seems that all these changes are a necessary process of keeping the cosmos renewed and alive. New growth cannot happen without the ending of things. In our modern culture, we tend to avoid looking at the reality of change and inevitable end or death of something, particularly ourselves. We try to avoid looking at those things. And we tend to behave as though we cannot handle them, viewing them as something unnatural or the enemy of existence. Yet all of us, even animals, have an organic, reliable inner technology for losses and endings, and that is called mourning, mourning, the ability to express our grief feelings following a significant loss.
Hare Krishna.
When I was living in Ireland,
Hare Krishna.
yeah,
Your voice is starting to break up
you
again.
can't
So
hear
I'm wondering if maybe
what happened.
we can improve the
You
bandwidth.
can't hear me.
Everyone, no. I'm thinking maybe we can improve the bandwidth if everyone shuts off their videos, with the exception of Rambaru. Vaishnavi,
can't hear
is
you at
that
all.
okay? Is that okay with you? Rambaru, can you hear me?
You want me to go back out? Should I go
Let,
back out?
let's try that again. Let's
I
try
can't
that
hear
again
you.
since you're not hearing me either. I'm so
Okay,
sorry.
I'm gonna go back out. All right.
Okay, thank you.
Life happens. What can you do? You know, we have so little control. So what I was about to say, when the Zoom so rudely interrupted me because of the technology, when I was living in Ireland on the they call it the Hare Krishna Island now, but we call it Innisrath in those days. We had a flock of peacocks that lived on the island. I believe they still are there. And in the middle of the night, I was woken up by this very strange, sad-sounding warble that I had never heard before. I could not make out what was making such a strange sound on the grounds nearby. In the morning, I went down to the front door of the house and discovered that in the night, a large sign that had been hanging on the front door of the house had fallen down, landing on the neck of a peacock and killing it in the process. All the other peacocks were standing around this dead peacock singing a very sad-sounding dirge or mourning song as they grieved the loss of their loved one. And another example of animals mourning was when my father moved into a nursing home and he never came home, but he left behind his cat who used to sleep with him in his chair. And after he left, the cat started to grieve. It would sit silently where my father's chair was, waiting for him to return, which of course he never did. And the cat languished probably another 6 to 12 months in his absence, visibly sad, not wanting to eat, and a behavior that you may witness in most animals who have had a relationship with each other, another animal, or with a human being, and they've grown attached to. So unless we numb our feelings, a living being naturally feels sad or angry and afraid when loss happens. These are feelings of grief that helps us work through the unappealing effects of death and endings, which is a natural part of change. Mourning is what acceptance looks like when we actually face the uncontrollable conditions of existence with our feelings. Let me say that again. Mourning, or this feeling of grieving, is what it looks like when we face these uncontrollable conditions of existence that are built in with our feelings. The fact that we are able to grieve demonstrates that we are meant to face losses and endings and to reconcile or integrate them. It's part of nature's technology to help us come to terms with the inevitable changes and losses in our lives and to prepare ourselves for what's coming next. It's part of the birthing process or the transformation process. So since every one of the givens of life represents loss, grief work is a skillful means which to face them all we have to do. So going back again to these 5 givens of life, everything changes and ends. Things do not always go according to plan. Life is not always fair. Pain is part of life, and people are not loving and loyal all the time. As long as we buy into society's denial of the need for grief, we lose our chance at strength in the face of what life brings. It's up to us to trust that mourning is how we integrate our losses and move through them to what comes next in our evolutionary cycle. So how might we help ourselves and others who have experienced a loss? We begin this process by creating a space. Only when we're ready. Obviously, if we had a traumatic loss, it may take some time before we're ready to talk about it or be in a space with somebody to talk with them about it. But when we're ready for us to look directly at the events surrounding the loss, then we may have to create or find a space where we can do that. And in this space, we can share our story of loss with someone we trust who will listen without judging or advising us throughout this process. And this is not simply a moment to report the details of the loss, like this happened. It's really about going deeply into getting in touch with our feelings, exploring our feelings as a means of digesting them. We have to digest at certain points in life what life is bringing to us. We're not just moving through life, charging ahead. It's like you're not eating. You have to digest. If you don't digest what you eat, it's not going to turn into healthy energy. In the same way, if we don't digest what's happening to us in life, it's not healthy also. We don't digest it and we can't make use of it to grow. So Rico identifies 3 primary feelings that accompany a loss. Typically we feel sadness, anger, and fear. If we don't actually connect with those feelings, we may never ever get over the loss. It's not about making up some kind of feelings, but allowing those feelings to be expressed rather than avoiding them. So having a space where we can actually sit with ourselves and get in touch with those feelings. When we actually do acknowledge and express our feelings of grief, what happens is a sense of compassion and gratitude toward ourselves that we endured the loss starts to emerge in ourselves. We allow ourselves to experience and express our feelings of grief. We gradually let go of the resentment, the blame, and the bitterness associated with loss. You can see this sometimes with elders or older people who haven't done any grief work in their entire life, and often they're grouchy and bitter and angry, and the heart becomes very hard. So in Krishna Bhakti, we want to use these experiences of loss to soften our heart and develop more and more compassion, which is the essence of the Bhakti process. Without acknowledging and mourning our grief feelings, we stay stuck in the past, and we're unable actually to move towards who we're becoming in our future. It's a real important part of the transformation process. And to become spiritually mature means to accept the givens of life as they are, and doing so helps us accept ourselves as we are as well. And then we begin to see that our personal life plans go more smoothly when they align with life's calling for us to be part of something greater than ourselves, which is to be engaged in affirming, supporting, and contributing to all of life by being open to the uncontrollable, changing aspects of life as a servant rather than as a competitor. So I'm going to stop here and see if there's any comments, reflections. I thought we start to chew this over, the topic becomes far more meaningful. So I don't know how you do this with no people have
Yeah.
can't see
So Hare
anybody.
Krishna Vaishnavis, if you have a question, you can feel free to raise your hand and I can unmute you. Or if you'd like, you can type it into the chat box. Okay. Okay, so we have Adi Shakti Devidasi with a question.
Yeah, Hare Krishna Mataji. I was thinking about that loss of faith in somebody or organization or loss of identity. That moment we already have that notion of about the other person and have all the negative emotions and the rage and anger towards that person because we are still grieving the loss of trust and it's not easy to build it. That moment, what's the best we can do? Even though by hearing you, I understand that accepting is that it was not under my control, give a lot of grounding to foundation, but then still that uh, we strive to have that trust back. That's, I don't know whether I'm making sense.
You're breaking up a little bit, but I will repeat, if you can hear me, I will repeat back what I heard. What I heard you say and ask is that, you know, sometimes we have lost trust in a person and we have some rage and anger and that something happened or they said something or did something to us and we have this anger and we might intellectually know we should forgive or what, but we can't because we have this feelings. Did I hear you correctly?
Yes, Mataji.
And are you asking what to do about that?
What the baby step we can take it for, because somewhere we strive to like wanted to have the trust back, you know, that attention go towards there. We like wanted that thing back, which we cannot have it, the trust or.
Yeah, building trust. Once trust is broken with someone who has betrayed us or we feel that we've been betrayed by, it's hard to build back if they've really done something like robbed us or you know, openly defamed us or something. And yet at the same time, there's grief underneath that needs to be expressed. And it doesn't mean that we allow ourselves to be walked over if there has been a legitimate breach of trust. I don't know what circumstance you're talking about, so that's difficult to address without knowing those details. And we have to also be able to grieve the grief that's underneath that. It may, you know, it's hurtful when we feel betrayed or our trust has been betrayed. And at the same time, it's helpful to know that often we feel betrayed by others because we have unrealistic expectations of them. You know, that we go back to those five true things that, you know, people are not loving and loyal all the time. That's people are conditioned souls like you and me. They're human. They're controlled by the modes of nature and so many things. And often we say and do things that perhaps if we had been more mindful and reflective, we might not have done or said. And I've done that too. That's very helpful for me when I'm judging out or I'm angry at other people for not being Krishna, to acknowledge that I'm not Krishna too, and I'm not perfect too. I'm a fallible person. So that helps me be able to, you know, let go of some of that anger or hurt when I feel betrayed or I feel that breach of trust. And it could well be if there's something really that happened, it's not just imagined or you've embellished it or it's gotten to be bigger than you can handle, to have a conversation with that person and to let them know how their behavior affected you without any expectations for them to do anything with it. And that's a hard thing, is that when we express our hurt, we have this expectation that other people will reciprocate in kind, and they may not be capable of doing that. So detachment and bhakti means to be detached from the result, but to clear ourselves and to move on, we have to acknowledge our grief. We may have to say something to the person in loving kindness that, this is how I'm not sure that you intended to hurt me in this way, and I need you to know this is how your behavior affected me, and then just leave it in their corner to respond or not. But once trust has been broken in a relationship, it's difficult to repair. So it requires action to transform it.
Thank you so much, Mataji.
Somebody's making a comment, a chat comment.
Hare Krishna. Yes. Actually, there was one before that came to me privately, and I will just read it. Can you hear me okay, Rambaru? Because you're starting to break up again. Can you hear me okay? Okay. You can. Okay.
Yeah,
I'm so sorry. So yes, there.
Can you hear me though? I mean, if you can.
Yeah,
Can you hear me?
I can make out okay. I'm not sure what the experience is for everyone else. Perhaps how.
Do you want to chat me? Is that what you can hear?
It's breaking again.
So. It is breaking.
I can hear.
Okay. Again, my experience is that I can hear well enough to understand, but you are breaking up. Yes. So let's try one. There's another question that came privately. Let's try that again. Let's try that and see how we go from there. The question is, how do you connect with feelings like anger and sadness when grieving without hitting through a wall or crying uncontrollably?
Let me repeat the question back to be sure I got it, because it was very broken. You're asking, what is anger and how do we control anger? Can you hear me?
I can hear you, yes. I'm wondering if maybe we should try disconnecting,
I can hear you.
Logging back in again.
Well, you're clear now.
Okay.
You're crystal clear right now. Yeah.
Okay, so I'll read the question once again. Okay. The Vaishnavi is asking, how do you connect with feelings like anger and sadness when grieving without hitting through a wall or crying uncontrollably? So basically how to handle our own difficulties in trying to, deal with grief.
You might cry uncontrollably. That's a normal process. You might hit the floor. That's okay. Just be safe wherever it is you're doing that. Certainly if you're that overwhelmed that you're hitting other people, that's not okay. But this is where the safe space is so crucial, is having, a space where you can express all those feelings. Anger is definitely a grief feeling. When life shifts quickly, we're pretty resistant to it, and change is happening all the time. And so when we have crisis, it means a sudden change. So often, in fact, most all the time, underneath anger is grief. In fact, if you look at a lot of the dynamics and emotions you experience, underneath is grief. So if you can be aware of that, take it down a notch. If you're like raging and angry, ask yourself, what is this really? I've lost something. What have I lost? Name the loss. Then sink into that grief. Cry those tears. They need to come out. If you have a broken leg, then you have blood and pus coming out. That's the way the body heals itself. If the heart is broken, you've got to cry those tears. That's heart blood coming out. Has to come out. It's a toxic release. Has to come out, and you'll feel so much better. It's like a cleansing, to be able to do that. If you feel scared of your emotions, then what is really needed is to have a person you trust sit with you and be a witness. In fact, it's more powerful if you have a sick person who can just listen without advising or interpreting. Some people go to counselors, and that's helpful too, that if you prefer to go to someone you don't know. And some people have a really good friend. If you have a friend like that, hang on to them. Priceless.
Hare Krishna. So I hope that was a satisfactory answer. If you'd like to type in a follow-up question, that would be okay. We'll move on to the next question, which is in the chat box yes, thank you, Rambaru Prabhu. That Vaishnavi who I just asked the question for says thank you. Okay, and so moving on to the next question in the chat box. This is a very challenging one. My husband left home, and it is quite possible that we will split up since he is having an affair. It's been a pretty tough week since he left. He asked for time to think, but it has hurt me a lot, and I don't know how long I can endure this situation. Your words are very comforting, Rambaru Prabhu. Any tips for me?
Yeah, you're breaking up. I'm reading the chat here, so I see it. Can you hear me? Can you hear me?
You're still breaking up, but we can hear you. Navarinda Devidasi, can you hear Rambaru okay?
Yes, it's breaking a little, but I can hear. Thanks.
Okay.
So let me repeat back what I heard you say. It was very, very broken, but I was reading the chat. So you're saying that your husband left you recently, and he said he needed to have time to think, or you needed to have time to think, but you're having a hard time enduring knowing that he left you for someone else. Did I get that right?
Actually, he has someone else, but he asked me a time to think if he wants to still marry with me or go with this another person. And it's very hard because I don't know how long I can wait. It's like I'm just sitting waiting and no perspective. Is very difficult, the situation.
Yeah. So waiting, the waiting is the hard part, right? That's the hard part. And the question I have maybe for you, and maybe you need to ask it yourself, of yourself, is that what alternative have you got? What is the alternative? Are there choices to be made at this moment? I don't know. Did you hear me? Did somebody hear me?
Navarinda Prabhu?
Yes, I'm hearing.
Yeah. Okay. But that's the question. Is there an alternative but waiting? There's some questions to ask in this sense. Is it, are you willing to wait for him to return? Are you willing to wait for him to give him another chance? Are you ready to move on? And are you ready to live without him? Those are questions to ask yourself. How long are you willing to wait? What are your conditions for that? Um, Either way, with him or without him, you're going to be experiencing grief. That's the natural part of transitioning. Your life will never be the same now that you have this piece of information and this happened. Your life can't go back. Your life will change. How will your life change? That's the question.
I think I can forgive. I have talked with my spiritual master. He's giving support to any decision that I take, if I stay with him, if I left him. But at the time, it's just wait him to give me an answer. But I think I can forgive. I don't know if he can still marry with me after that, but if it doesn't work, well, I have Krishna, I have the devotees, and I have my
I
spiritual
cannot.
master. Can you hear me?
Okay. Rumbaroo.
I can hear. I can. I can hear now, but I didn't hear anything she just said.
Okay.
But I hear you now, so I don't know why now you're clear. I don't know what's happening there. I didn't have this earlier today, so I don't know. The Zoom gods are not on
Yeah,
our side.
they're not with us today.
But you're clear now. Now I hear you. Now you are clear.
Okay.
So maybe this person should follow up with me and have a private conversation after this at a certain time. Maybe we can schedule a time, just the two of us talking about that. Maybe that would be the way to move forward.
That sounds okay.
Thank you.
Okay. Yes, Navarinda, you can
Yeah.
also just contact me directly. I'll give you my email address and then I can forward it.
Yeah.
Okay. Do we have any other questions for Rumbaroo Prabhu?
Hare Krishna, Tiffany Prabhu, I do see your hand raised up by Sachi Priya Prabhu.
Okay. Okay. Sachi
Yes.
Priya. Yes.
Hare Krishna. My question is, I could not hear the second of the 5 true things. If you could repeat what the second one of the 5 true things were, I really appreciate this. Thank you very much.
The second of the 5 true things are things do not always go according to plan. Is that what you wanted to know?
Yes, thank you, Prabhu. This is such an important subject. Thank you very
You know,
much.
Yeah. Tiffany, you know, I might, since I have a clear connection with you, maybe if people have a question or comment, they could put it on the chat and you could repeat it. Maybe that's the way.
Okay. We can do that again.
Maybe. I mean, you're now, yeah, but I heard her.
Okay, good. Okay. Actually, I have a question for you. I really appreciate how you mentioned, you brought up, of course, you know, naturally when we think of loss, we think of losing, you know, material things or tangible things. But I thought it was very important how you brought up the fact that when we lose intangible things like enthusiasm or identity or trust, that those also have to be mourned. And I often feel that those are harder for us to kind of give ourselves space to mourn. You know, we don't do that so well because we don't tend to recognize that. So I was wondering if you could help us with, you know, how we can give ourselves that space to mourn intangible things?
Well, like created yourself. This is how I train: is we create spaces, and we educate ourselves a little bit more about the theory of grief. And it helps a lot to know that when you're having those feelings of sadness, these are natural and normal, and you're not going crazy. A lot of people, when they get overwhelmed with feelings, think, "Oh, my mom must be going crazy." It's a completely natural process. And, it's described by specialists like you're going through a wild jungle, and there's bumps and weeds and briars and all kinds of things you're gonna encounter on that journey. And if you keep going, you actually come out on the other side a much more compassionate and enlightened person. That's how we grow. It's a birthing. And it's not that death is the only time we rebirth. It's life is full of death and birth all the time. And if we go with it, we're going to be transformed into a person who is enlightened. That's a part of the process. Reincarnation's happening all the time. So you have to create that space. There are people who do this. Grief groups,
Thank you so very much for your answer. Thank you. Is there anyone else? Would anyone else like to ask a question?
Hare Krishna. I apologize. My question's a little long. If I could speak it out instead of type it out. Is that okay? Are you able to hear me properly?
kind of. It's fuzzy, but you try me. Tiffany's there. Maybe she can. It comes and goes. This connection seems to be coming and going, so I don't know what to do.
Rambrub, it's so
Try
nice to see you again. Hare
or
Krishna.
text.
Sure, thank you. I'm personally going through a tough time right now with my siblings. I had an incident where, in one sense, I expected unconditional love. And it made me think of the fifth of the five, which is not everyone is loyal and loving always. The hurtful part is, of course, from a material perspective, they are your family and you expect them to love you unconditionally and do anything for you. And it's hurtful. And of course, I know in theory, forgive completely, that we'll get over it. But I feel disappointed and I feel hurt. And I thought about your answer about the trust. In one sense, it's not so much trust was broken, it's just I feel like they disappointed me in being, I guess, blood related, which of course we know is a material connection. But still, we can understand in theory, but in reality, it's still hurtful. And I'm trying to go through that process. And I know I still love them. They love me, but you expected more in one sense. And I'm not sure if you have any helpful suggestions and advice to get through it, even though I know in theory I should forgive fully. I know not everyone is loving and loyal at all times, but you expect more from your family. And of course, as a defense mechanism, you say you just want to push them out. I'm not going home for Thanksgiving. I'm not going home for Christmas. I don't need them in my life. I have to forge forward on my path. So I'm not sure if you have any advice for that. Thank you so much. Hare Krishna.
And I'm not sure I got the whole thing. I can try. Can you hear me clearly?
I can make out what you're saying. Yes. Thank you so much.
Okay. What I understood was that something happened between you and your family members, and I'm assuming that's your nuclear family, like mom and dad or siblings or something. And they did or said something, and you got really disappointed and hurt, and finding a really hard time to, forgive them, and something about not going home for Thanksgiving and wanting to move on in your path. So I don't know. Did I hear any of that correctly?
Yes. Ultimately, I understand in theory that we're supposed to forgive 100 completely, and perhaps that time will heal, and it's quite still raw. And to your last point within, I think, the five things that not everyone is loyal and loving always, but it's hard for still in practicality and reality to understand that, given that we are still in material bodies and your family in theory are supposed to always be there for you, and if anything, the people you're supposed to rely on and be there for you always and unconditionally. And I feel disappointed that they weren't, my siblings. And so if you have any advice of how to, I guess, deal with that, that'd be helpful. Thank you so much.
Well, in this age of quarrel and hypocrisy, the family system is sadly not always very functional. You're right that the family system is meant to be our support group. They're meant to have our back our whole lives, and there's this assumption there. And sadly, a lot of people haven't had that modeled for them in their families and their families and their families before them. And when they get into their current family, then they don't really know how to overcome their own impulsive needs versus what they should be doing to support others. So that's one challenge we have in this age, is that the family system is very much undermined in this age. It's competing for time with our jobs and all kinds of things. So that makes it really hard. But you're right that our families are meant to be our support system. Secondly, when we have these kind of experiences where the people who are supposed to be there for us are not there for us, this is also nature's way of helping break open in us, grasping hold of more consistent and stable support systems. For example, if we think in terms of life and the universe and the natural way of things, and God or the source of your life as being the ground of all things, the ground of our support that we sit on, as we lose our trust in those transient things, it compels us to reach for sustainable things. Because after all, no matter how loving your family is, they will not last. Parents die, children grow up, they get married, they go away. It's not a long-term sustainable relationship. And parenthood is very good and wanted as a functional institution when the children are small and need to be nurtured and educated, but they leave the nest. And then they come home hoping that the family will nurture them like they did when they were children, but the parents are older and they don't have the energy. Now you're taking care of them. So these experiences in our spiritual journey can help us ask the question, okay, my family was good and for a period of time, but now they're not really offering me the support that I need. Where else can I get the support? And this is where people then look out for intentional family versus birth family. This is where spiritual community becomes the place we go to find nurturing and support with kindred spirits. Because I think what happens is we outgrow our physical, biological families as we spiritually grow. We're looking for spiritual family which is what, you know, Sangha really is finding people who really understand me and can really support me. And often it's not our birth family that is the ones who can nourish us the best. It's disappointing, it's hurtful, but it's part of the birthing process. It's growing up and getting our needs met in a deeper way with a community of people that might be more sustainable beyond our birth or nuclear family. It's part of the process also of growing, is to get disappointed by unsustainable things in the material world. Yeah, that's a sad reality. That's a sad truth. And not everyone can sustain all our needs. That's the reserved skill of the supreme being, or the source of life is the only personality that can sustain a friendship through thick and thin, because people can't be loyal and loving all the time. It's unable to do it. But it hurts. It definitely hurts.
Thank you so much. That was really helpful. And one thing that really resonated is that it's true, as we grow, say as I grow spiritually and my siblings don't, we grow farther and farther apart in interest. And it, in one sense, breaks the conventional cultural idea that your biological family is your biggest support system, or the ones that are going to connect with you the most. And it's encouraging that, yes, having that detachment and realizing that even maybe you're connected with spiritualists or sanghas much more than your biological family. And that's very helpful. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Okay, so should we move forward? Do you have something else to share, Rambaru Prabhu? Or I was thinking perhaps we could break up into and maybe talk about some of these 5 principles that you've given. Oh, actually, I'm sorry. There is something else that just came up in the chat box. Yes, and I also have another one that came privately that I'll read after. Sashi Priya, would you like to go? Since it's also in the...
Do you want me to read it out loud? I can do that.
Right. That way you can,
okay,
read
sure.
it, and she can, and Rambaru can also see it in the chat box.
Okay, sure. All right.
Thank you.
Yes. So I was hoping for some insight on how we can remember that these experiences of grief can be opportunities for deepening our connection with Krishna, because we can get lost in that. We can forget that really easily, right? We're overwhelmed. And because I thought of it this morning, I was listening to Rannath Swami speak about, and he discussed several times about how, you know, these great experiences that the saintly persons went through in the Srimad Bhagavatam occurred at times of great stress or turmoil or strife in the world and in their lives. And so I just wondered if you had some insight that you could share about that.
I didn't catch it. I'm sorry.
Well, you can read it in the chat if you. I wrote it in the chat. You could read it there.
Do you see it, Rambaru Prabhu? It's the very last one, yeah.
Yeah, I see your chat. I see your chat. Well, it's really about surrender. You know, when we think in terms of acceptance, the whole process actually of Krishna consciousness boils down to being able to accept what is first. And not just accept like, okay, it rolls off my back, but sink deep in it, in the sense of surrendering our hearts to a bigger reality, which is the source of all life, the living force, the living energy that has personality that we're swimming in all the time. And I find it really helpful to cry out when I'm sinking into this despair or perhaps lostness and grief and I can't see, to cry for help. I mean, I really sit down and I'm addressing the Lord of my heart, who's the Lord of the heart of everyone, praying for help and guidance. Because the Supreme Personality is a person. That's why we call Krishna the Supreme Personality, and we don't just call it some, non-dual substance. We're actually, we really do have the experience as Vaishnavas that when we call out, there's someone listening. So we're reaching for this relationship that we're actually engaged in. So when you're finding yourself overwhelmed, cry for Krishna or whatever name you have for that source of your life. Cry out, help me. Help me see, help me understand. I'm falling. Catch me, and he will. She will, whatever you want to call, because this universe is a benevolent place. And sometimes there's also malevolence when people turn their back on the all good supreme being. And then we experience life as being darkness. When we turn our back to the sun, we only see the darkness. So the way to see the light is to turn our face around. And the way we do that is we face Krishna directly. And he's in our heart, but he's also outside of us in the hearts of all living beings. So just sit down, close your eyes, take a breath, and talk like you're talking to me out loud. I say this to my students. When I was going to college, I didn't have anybody to talk to. Like, I didn't know. People go to school, they sit all day with somebody, they don't talk to them, really. And I'd go out to the forest and I would talk to the trees because I understood that Krishna was in the heart of those trees, just like any other person. And they don't talk back and they don't criticize and they don't advise you. So it's a very, very safe environment. And as I would process whatever feelings or problems, I also was hearing and teasing out the complexity of them. And, I came to some really good answers that are right coming from my own heart, because the source of all of our solutions is within us, because Krishna is in our heart. So this is the moment when you find yourself on the edge of despair, is calling out, crying out, and things will change. I guarantee you, I'm so completely sure of it, that when I am going bed to bed in the hospital and I meet homeless people who are like, please take care of me. They're kicking me out of the hospital and I won't survive on the street. I can't take, obviously, everybody home that says that. And I tell them, just call for help. I don't say chant Hare Krishna. I just say the universe is a benevolent place. Cry for help. It will respond. Life will respond. And it does. I go back the next day and things have changed. They may not have been what the person expected, but they get an idea, a new idea, and it changes. That would be my strategy there.
Thank you so much, Prabhu.
Welcome.
And I have one more question that I will read that came to me. This is from a Vaishnavi. Actually, the answer you just gave sounds very much like it'll be helpful in this situation as well, but I want to honor this Vaishnavi because, I want to honor her feelings. So this Vaishnavi is actually in the fire zone in Oregon, and she's had so much turbulence in her life. Yes, it's such a difficult time there right now. And so what she's saying is, sometimes I think that the world is a crashing wave of hardship after hardship. I feel that either I can stay in the turbulent churning water, or I can make the effort to stay out in front of the breaking water, to basically surf the crushing water of this material world. But to do this, it requires skill and effort to stay out in front of the crashing waves. And sometimes she feels like she doesn't have the ability, strength, or intelligence to attain the necessary skill and effort to do so. And so she's also saying that, she thinks that it doesn't hurt anyone else to remain tossed around in the churning waves. However, she's also saying that that might be a problem with self-worth. So, yeah, oh, and okay, and I also want to add that she also sent a second message saying that she just, sometimes expects more from life, and she doesn't see how Krishna can really help her. So she's just having a difficult time dealing with, one thing after another after another.
I didn't hear everything, but my sense is that she was telling about how she doesn't really see how it's a benevolent place, the universe right now, with all the fires and all the natural disasters happening, and being able to see beyond that is a challenge. Did I hear that correctly, or Tiffany, did I miss something?
That is the gist of it. And I think the other bigger part of it too is that she's wondering if she has the strength and the intelligence and, if she can go forward. And she doesn't, at this point, she doesn't know how Krishna could really help her. She's not seeing that.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing about that. We cannot enter in with our rational mind. This is a mystical process, this Vaishnava tradition. And it's only through surrender first. If we go about this process by, like, first prove to me that I'm going to trust you, we will never understand Krishna because he's a person. And so really the first step is to approach with even if you don't have trust, it's about even acknowledging in a vulnerable way, in an honest and humble way, I don't see it. Krishna, I don't believe you're there. Help me feel you there. That was Arjuna saying to Krishna, show me that universal form. It's so I don't help me see you. I don't feel it. I don't understand. It's a mystical process, and we have to pray for that guidance and pray for that vision. And if our heart is truly sincere to see things as they are, there's a veil. We have recovered by this veil that covers our ability to see things as they are. And through surrender of the heart, then suddenly things Krishna will show us if we pray for an idea and we're actually attentive or waiting or vigilant. You can't comprehend it. If you look around, it looks like the world is falling apart, and it is. And in my view, it's a preparation for something new that's really important that's coming. We will never be the same as a world, and as a result of what's happening now, there's an enormous amount of new life coming as far as new vision, and not trusting some of the principalities and powers that are in place. People are looking for alternatives and going back to the earth and connect. They realize how valuable and important and essential to our life is community and loving relationships and the things that are really important in life. People are starting to pay attention to, and because all of those unsustainable things are crumbling around us. But the new things, the sustainable things, are what people are reaching for. So this is, in some ways, perhaps the only way many human beings can see the sustainable, important values of life is by having the rest of it torn away. Again, I go back to prayer for guidance, for ideas, for waiting, praying together, just like when we chant in community. I know in the Bible, but also other places, it says that wherever two or more are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst. So God incarnates in between people when they are glorifying his name. This is where the kirtan comes from for us. So being in a community of people who are actually vibrating the glories of Krishna, he reveals himself. Allah, Jehovah, Buddha, doesn't matter what you call God. But I hear you. It's scary to me too. And sometimes I'm overwhelmed looking at all the suffering. And as a person who listens to people suffering, more than ever, people are experiencing doubt and anxiety and grief and trauma. And it's hard to hear all of that plus on all of mine and then looking out and seeing. So I can only go back to prayer and taking care of yourself too. When we're grieving and we're in trauma, having a healthy diet, this sounds so practical. It really helps. Walking, spending time in nature, so we can connect with the world and the earth and what's natural and sustainable. Eating clean, healthy food, and putting healthy things in our mind, all of that makes a huge difference in coping. You know, I hope that was helpful. I don't know.
And also, I'd just like to say to the Vaishnavi who put that question forward, please know that you have this ministry. That's why we're all coming together. This is why we're doing this monthly, so that we can continue to build a strong community of support for all of us. So, and I hope that every Vaishnavi here realizes that you can reach out to the ministry and we can help connect you with resources that will help you get through difficult times in your lives. So does anyone else have a question that they would like to ask? Again, you can feel free to put it in the chat box. If you want to be anonymous with your question, you can send it directly to me or even to Rambaru herself, or okay. And while we're waiting, just in case someone else decides, I actually have another question, Rambaru. So we often, change, of course, can be difficult for all of us at certain times, especially with everything that's happening now. But we also know that change brings about new opportunities for us as well. So how can we welcome changes, not when they're so, traumatic as some of the things that are going on in the world right now, but on a smaller scale when, new things are coming into our lives, and sometimes, people are afraid to embrace that change because they kind of get in this comfortable position with things, the way that things have been with the status quo, even though the status quo isn't so comfortable. So how can we be open to change, since like you said, it is inevitable? There's nothing that we can really do to stop it. It comes with time. So what could we do to, open ourselves up to that and accept it in a way that will be healthy and beneficial? Did you get any of that? I'm sorry.
I am not sure I got all of that, Tiffany, but this is what I heard. you said something about inevitable time and change, and how do we embrace it or go through it in a healthy way?
Yes, in a healthy way, because as you said, it's inevitable and there's nothing, we can't really stop it. It comes with time. So how can we open ourselves up so that we can accept the change in a way that I guess is less hurtful or less, so that we don't make it so difficult for ourselves?
Well, just first of all, being aware that anything can happen to anybody. When we make our plans, we need to. You hear sometimes people will say from different religions, God willing, Krishna willing. So when we make a plan, we have to acknowledge that anything can happen to anybody. And I may make my big plans, it may not happen. Prabhupada used to say, we need to live as if this were our last day and make plans as if we were going to live forever. And I know in some Jewish traditions, they also have this notion after the Passover where, people have to be ready for Exodus, that you always have your bags packed, acknowledging how temporary life is. That's a reality we all have to come to terms with. So first of all, being aware of that, that's a real thing. We are going to die sometime, sooner or later. That's a real thing. We're in God's waiting room right now. We're just sitting here waiting. Life is very short. It's meant for something. What is it meant for? That's an important question to ask in order to make a plan in our current reality. We will have to ask ourselves, okay, what is the goal of life as a big picture? What is life meant for? And what is my goal inside that big goal? So, for example, in Vaishnavism and also in Christianity, and possibly other religions, there's this notion that the goal of life is to learn how to love unconditionally God and all others. Or in Buddhism, they might call it loving kindness. Different religions. So this notion of everything that's happening to us often is an opportunity to hone that skill, learning to love without desire for result. This is my own personal opinion, and maybe it resonates with our philosophy. I haven't found the Shastras to support it, but maybe there is. But my experience, having worked with people who have suffered a lot, and my own life, is that a lot of times our current suffering is a response in a previous life or in a previous moment in our history that we have not been compassionate to another person who's undergoing special needs, disability, poverty, ugliness, discrimination, whatever. We have not perhaps been very compassionate in a previous moment. And now, by blessing, in fact, it's a mercy that we now get to experience what it feels like to be poor and ugly and discriminated against, and all those, or something, hunger. Because, and in this way, we now understand what that suffering is like. And now we can be compassionate and not want others to feel that because we've suffered. So if whatever that means to you, I don't know, but the whole goal of life is to learn to be unconditionally compassionate. And so what am I doing to help nurture that in myself? And maybe that would be tied to our vocation and our mission in life, depending on what age we're in. If we already have a job and we're already on a life path, how can we use that occupation to nurture within ourselves and others this notion of unconditional compassion? So it makes it easier if we're first of all aware of what we're trying to do here and deciding, what choices can I make to help me be nimble. If I should die tomorrow, Or if I knew that I only had 7 days to live, what would I be doing with my time right now? Would I be sitting here watching a computer game? Maybe not. Would I be on Facebook all day? Maybe not. You know. So I think that challenges us. These givens of life challenges us to really lean into what is meaningful and sustainable, and will actually sustain us beyond the grave or beyond death. That's my take on it.
Thank you so much. That was very helpful. And like everything, you know, Krishna consciousness seems to be the answer. So, so yes.
Seems to be.
Yes. So there is another question that has come through that I will try to read to you. Hopefully you can hear it. This Vaishnavi has written, because of loss of a loved one and not so good behavior of people at the time, it's difficult for her to trust Krishna also. Because of loss, and because of loss, fear develops and anger develops. And these negative emotions are difficult to handle. And fear develops, again, if situations are not so good. Will Krishna come and help? Or will he let us suffer our bad karma? And because we have to face our bad karma. So how to trust Krishna and feel his love at that time and his presence in that time as well.
I didn't catch it. I couldn't get the whole thing.
Okay. So
yeah, can you type it?
Okay, let's see. I wish I could. Let's see here. Yeah. So I'm just gonna, if it's okay with you, I'm just gonna type a kind of a shortened version of it.
This Vaishnavi lost a loved one and others were not so kind about it. How to trust Krishna and feel his love and presence in the situation.
And I just added a little.
Does he want us to suffer our bad karma? No, I don't know. I'm not Krishna. I can't imagine an all unconditionally loving creator would want us to suffer. Obviously, he sent so many revealed people to kind of help us free ourselves from suffering. And so the only way to trust Krishna's love is to lean into it, which is why the chanting of his holy name is so merciful, that in this age of Kali, that he is actually incarnating in the sound of his holy name. And so we can't believe it if we don't have that experience, and we can't have that experience if we don't actually chant it, you know, and embrace it as Krishna incarnating in the sound of his name. And therefore we're back to prayer, face to face. So we're not just chanting the Hare Krishna mantra as the mantra that controls the mind. It's coming from somewhere deep within us when we're calling out, and the presence and the love will be experienced as a byproduct of that deep chanting. So yeah, people, this is where education and grief education is so important and helpful. If we understand why people do what they do, then we can more easily forgive their bad behavior. You know, most people do better if they know better, but people who are conditioned souls, and that's most all of us, we behave the way we do because we've seen it modeled by parents and teachers, and that's the way society behaves. So, but when we know better how to behave, we do better. And even Jesus, when they crucified him on the cross, the last thing he said before he said, into your hands I commend my spirit, he said, Father, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. They don't know what they're doing. And so every teacher and guru and realized soul knows people are behaving the way they do out of ignorance. They don't know what they're doing. Just like parents, they forgive their children kicking them and pooping in the diaper and throwing a tantrum. They don't know what they're doing. So I would encourage anyone who has had a loss recently or ever and hasn't really done some education around that, it will greatly help you cope if you learn some more about grief. And I will recommend a book that our students are studying right now called Understanding Your Grief by a grief specialist named Alan Wolfelt. He has a website with about 30 books, on all kinds of grief, suicide, children. So I would start there with learning how to manage grief, is to educate yourself a little bit. That will help a great deal. But people don't know better. What can we do?
What is the book again, Mataji?
Let me write it. You got it?
Thank you.
So does anyone else have a question? Again, this is our time to come together. So, and we're so fortunate to have Rambaru Prabhu here with us today. So we want to take advantage of this time. Okay. Okay, well, I don't see any more questions.
Hare Krishna Mataji, I have a question.
Okay. Go ahead, Shoma.
Mataji, me and my spouse, we are going through a divorce. He's already left the house and I have two teenage kids, daughter going to college next year and my son. So I do understand from where he is, like he has a lot of inner conflicts which made him, which made him to leave. Like a lot of childhood trauma and everything which played out in the relationship. So I have deep compassion for him, that whatever he did was whatever he could do is best. It's not that he did anything on purpose. That is where he is right now. At the same time, how do I, what perspective do I bring so that I show compassion for myself as well, that not just feel the compassion for him, but also feel compassion for myself?
I'm not sure I got it. You said, I heard the first part, your husband left recently and you have two teenage children, and you have compassion because you know that he has inner conflicts that are like traumatic and unresolved. And you're asking, how can I also take care of myself or be compassionate on myself?
Yes.
Go through that? Is that what you
Yeah.
asked?
Yeah, I can see where he is and I can see his pain. I feel a lot of compassion for him and I don't have any grievance or anger on him that why he did whatever he did. I can perfectly understand where he is. So so that part I don't have the anger and resentment on him. But at the same time, how do I have the compassion for myself also? Um, like I've been trying to
You
be
have
yeah, I have been trying to rescue him for the last whatever years, trying to be the rescuer when my own soul is suffering due to the pain that he was inflicting. But I understand that I have a lot of compassion and empathy for him. But how do I also look at myself and feel compassionate that I don't let my soul suffer trying to rescue someone else?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And that's a really important point in terms of, you know, you have a limit. That's a part of reality is we all have strengths and we have limitations. And we have a limit to how much we can care. You know, Krishna is the one who can heal everyone. We can't heal everyone. We can't love unconditionally, but Krishna can. So if you have a person who's left you and has not dealt with their own pain and their own trauma, there's not a lot you can do to change them. Now you have to give all your energy to taking care of yourself. Because, you know, we can try to help other people, but if my helping you is hurting me, then I have to create a boundary. That's a sure sign that you need to create a boundary if by trying to help someone else, in the end, you're the one that gets hurt. Now you need to limit yourself. And rescuing is disempowering. This notion that I actually can fix somebody else, it disempowers yourself because, first of all, you cannot do it. Everybody has their karmic path. They have to make choices to figure it out. You cannot make your husband do that inner work. The only person you can control is yourself. So when you try to rescue someone else or try to fix it for them, what it communicates to them is that you don't think they're good enough to fix themselves. And of course, we know that's not true because Krishna is in the heart of everyone. He's also in the heart of your husband. And he also has a very personal and intimate relationship with Krishna, even if your husband doesn't know it or doesn't have that connection with him. Krishna, from within his heart and also from external experiences, is trying from Krishna's side to nurture and to attract him back to a relationship with himself. And he's doing that with you too. Krishna is also trying to get you to come back to an eternal loving relationship with him. He's a person. So, you know, if your husband has left the home and he's no longer, you know, taking responsibility and you're getting a divorce, it's very, very deeply grieving. You know, there's a lot of hurt and pain there. It's going to take some grief process for you and for him. It puts you both in some real difficult emotional experiences. And just like a death or an ending of anything else, you need to have a space where you can process that. There are people who are not in devotee communities who are grieving. If you can find a grief support group, it's more powerful to process with people who are enduring a similar loss as you. I don't know where that would be in your context, but it's much more powerful to connect with people in a shared experience of grief than just one-on-one. And if that's not possible, you might connect with one of our Karuna Care education students who are being trained and are quite effective in companioning people through grief. So that might be a possibility, just to have a place to process, talk about it, cry your tears and stuff. But certainly now put your energy in yourself. And of course, you have your children. I don't know how this is impacting them. Surely they have their own grief process. And I don't know if that's something you can do with them. Children have a whole different relationship to a divorce grief than the spouses do. And be sure they have their own trauma they're dealing with, even if they're teenagers. It's very difficult, very
Yeah,
difficult. Almost harder than death because the person's still walking around, you know?
exactly. Yep. Yeah, that's when a person is no longer there. He's no longer
Yeah,
there.
it's
Like,
very
but when he's
hard.
alive, then that is where it gets difficult. Yeah. Thank you, Mataji. That really helps. Yeah.
Okay, and if there are no more questions, perhaps we can end here. Is there anyone else who would like to ask a question? Okay, okay. Well, thank you so very much, Rambaru Prabhu, for sharing your energy and your time and your wisdom with all of us. We're so very grateful to have you in this Sangha. And we'll go ahead and end here. Oh, okay. Athena says thank you. I don't know if you see that in the chat box. Thank you so much, she says. Yes, yes. So let's all thank Rambaru Prabhu for being with us today. If you can all unmute and we can close with 3 Hari Bols for Rambaru for sharing her time with us. Everybody can unmute. Yeah, and show your faces.
Thank you,
Yes.
Rambaru. It's very, very nice.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Haribol.
Thank you so much, Mataji. Thank you all.
Yeah, such a very
Thank you very
important.
much, Mataji.
Really appreciate sharing your wisdom with us.
Yes.
Thank you so much. Can you please just give one in a minute, a quick recap of how to overcome the fear and how to connect to Krishna?
Did you get that, Rambaru? How to work on fear and
You're asking me for a recap of everything.
connect.
In 10 words or less. Okay. Is that what you're asking me?
So I just put in the chat box, Rambaru, I put kind of what she said in there. The main gist of it was how to work on fear and connect with Krishna.
How to work on fear.
Just remember Krishna.
Never forget
Chant every
Krishna.
day.
Hari Nama, Hari Nama, Hari Namaiva Kevalam. Okay, well, thank you also being here. Please just give Rambaru 3 Hari Bols. Hari Bol!
Haribol.
Thank you.
Haribol.
Haribol.
Yes, all right. Panchakalpa Tarubhyascha, Kripa Sindhu Bhivacha,
Patitanam Pavanebhyo Vaishnavebhyo
Namo Namaha. Ki Jai. Haribol, thank you all so much for being here. I'm sorry about the technical difficulties, but I think most of us got what we wanted or needed from the Sangha.
Thank you, Mataji Tiffany Cooper, for being a nice host.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. This is usually Govinda Priya's job, so I just stepped in. But thank you so much. And please come back for the next Sangha. We have another one at the end of the month.
Sure will. What is it gonna be?
The 26th, I believe. I'm terrible with dates, but it's the 4th Saturday. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all. Haribol. Enjoy the rest of your weekend. Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna.